Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional from Denver, USA, Rocio Perez. Rocio, welcome to the show.
Ash, it's such a wonderful pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Rocio is the Chief Leadership Officer, and she's an author. And all of you know I am very partial to authors. She's an author of a book titled The Mind Shift Game, and we'll discuss Rocio's book, The Mind Shift Game, in a little while. So, Rocio, tell me about your own amazing journey in brief.
Wow, my amazing journey started off as a little girl that I wanted to become a teacher. I wanted to touch, move, inspire people. I was only 5 years old. I had no clue. I would run around with my tattered books and I would talk about someday I would become a teacher. And that led me to starting on my own leadership journey to coach and mentor students in university, get them into through university and onto their careers in my late teens, if you can imagine that. And it's been a fascinating journey to help people from all over the world so that they can be successful in what makes them happy, healthy, and wealthy in their version of that.
Amazing. And, you also speak about Unstoppable, the 7 steps to becoming a more intentional leader. And why we will talk about leadership, but I want to start with asking you about these 7 steps.
Most definitely. Well, the 7 steps in becoming a more intentional leader came from the idea of like what helped me. I come from a very non-traditional background. I was a teenage runaway, if you can only imagine it. I ran away from home at the age of 12. Life was different. It was difficult. I had to pave my own way. And what I discovered it is taking a look at how do I function as a human being and what got me to where I wanted to be as I was helping people from all over the world achieve
Right.
that. And so, in those particular steps, is really understanding how we get to shift and create the life that we love and desire. So, a tree can only be a tree, yet a human being can be anything that that human being
Well said.
desires, given that they have the capacity to be able to follow through and have that commitment. And so that's where it all begins, is really deciding what it is that we want, making sure that we have that belief, that we can visualize it, because if we can see the future, we can live in that future and aligning our beliefs to where we want to be, right? Because we can't say, hey, I see a lot of leaders that have this push and pull approach and where they want something so bad, yet everything inside of their programming actually says, no, you cannot have it. So it doesn't matter how hard they try unless they become consciously aware of that and feed that positivity into themselves, filling their cups. So, and then also talks about finding the individuals that can coach us to take us along the way because it's so much easier. Life is faster, it's easier, everything happens for a reason. As long as we align ourselves with those individuals who have been there and who understand the process, that it's an individual process. If you think about a seed, that seed was everything inside of it was its to its perfection from the beginning. And that's where we see to guide individuals to being from where they want to be to where they want to be. And it's an individual process. It's an internal process. Nobody gets to decide for us. We get to decide for ourselves. And that's what really makes it very successful. We provide a roadmap. We even have an assessment inside of Unstoppable, which is a book. It is the book that keeps on giving. You can go through that book a million times and discover a million things each time that you go through it. Why? Because it's about reflection and where you're at that given point in time.
And of course, the knowledge that's coming from the book is unstoppable, right?
The knowledge that's coming from the book is unstoppable, right? Because it continues to give. And then we took it to another level. I wanted to level the playing field. I figured, how do we get more individuals to achieve their success? And it doesn't matter about finances, because you can give somebody all the time, and you know this, Ash, you can give them the time, the energy, the money, the education, the resources, the networks, the everything, and they may be stuck, right? There's something there that may not be functioning. And until they become consciously aware of that, they can start to shift. So we decided to take it to another level. We have the workbook. You can go through it, gain a lot of knowledge, understand why we're getting blocked, how to move forward. have our own plan and really testing, tracking, tweaking our way to success.
Mm.
And then we said, how about we put it inside of a box? It is the first self-coaching system in the world, the Mindshift game.
Mm-hmm.
It is the first self-coaching system in the world. And what it does, it returns the power back to the people. Like the people get to decide. You get to decide and work on build your courage muscle through taking actions, bold actions every single day. Then you get to tap into your confidence, right? You start to boost your confidence. I was working with a lot of people who were multimillionaires and they didn't know how they lost their confidence. Hey, they've exited 3 times successfully. And now all of a sudden they're facing that and saying, I don't know what to do. And then taking into that and going into tapping into our vision, not mother, father, teacher, preacher's vision, because we already know, a lot of us want to please our parents. We want to make them happy. We become engineers, doctors, whatever it is that we're becoming. Sometimes it's not based on our vision. And once we go through those particular processes of taking courageous actions, boosting our confidence, now we can expand our vision, our true vision, and then really step into our power, like that power that we had as that 2-year-old. I keep on thinking every child, they want something and they're willing to go after it. And then tapping into their amazing energy. Each of these is in a week. The game is played in 8-week increments, and people can tap into it. They can reflect on what they're doing. They can actually see it. They can journal their way to success. It has the game board that shows them every step of the way where they're at to achieving their goals. And it really helps them think. It invites them to create a new reality, their new reality.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm going to try and see if we can find this game in India or somewhere, because I'd love to understand a little more about the game. So coming now to leadership, you are a chief leadership officer. Let me start by asking you a very basic question, and I'm sure you've been asked this many times. What makes a good leader, and are leaders born or are they made?
That's a very good question that comes directly out of my book as well. I love it. I believe that we're all leaders. We're all leaders. As long as we get to tap into, we're leaders of our life. We're leaders of everything. I believe that we're definitely born. And when we see that we have the capacity to be able to transform ourselves and then look inside of ourselves, what makes an extraordinary leader is to do our own work on ourselves, to be able to lead ourselves, to discover our blind spots. And we all have them, right? There is that sliver of what we know, and then there's all that we may know, and then all that we don't know as a result of that. And so for me, that's one of the major things that we see in that process of leadership. How do we continue to move forward into it to discover ourselves? So that way, when we're leading others, we get to see what that process, we know exactly what that process is like. Therefore, we're a lot more vulnerable. We're a lot more authentic. We connect with people at a different level, and we can understand and be very subtle in our way of leading them into their own successes.
Very interesting. And over the years, what are some of the trends that you have noticed when it comes to leadership?
I think for leadership, I've seen that a lot more companies are investing in individuals, and that they may not have the capacity to implement what they learn. And I see that that's a lot of frustration. 93% of the leaders that we work with may not have the tools, knowledge, abilities. They were great at managing projects, managing widgets, not managing people, right? And really leading people to their own success. What I see now is that there's a lot more company leaders that are willing to work with individuals, and the whole landscape over COVID has changed. We know that. Everything is very different now.
That is true. And yet, and I'd love to get your perspective, a lot of leaders that I have spoken to say that the most difficult time of their leadership journey was during the pandemic. I mean, they had to keep their teams together, working from different parts of the country or the world, make sure the bottom lines were protected, good stocks were available in the markets. What are your thoughts?
I think my thoughts have been that there must be a human component to it, right? We can't do this relationship via the internet there's something to be said about our humanity, being able to connect with each other on a regular basis that really helps move people and really understand that they're connected, right? There's such a disconnect to be behind a camera when we're not there. I know that when I host events online, it's very different than when I host events in person where people are moved. You can feel an energy, you can feel the connection, the authenticity with that. I'd say that my hope for leaders around the world is that they continue that human connection as much as possible, because there's definitely a disconnect. We can go any way, yet the most important way to be is connect with our humanity.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. One more question on leadership, then we'll move to coaching. You live in a very, very culturally diverse country. And yet we know that culture has its own impact on the way we think as leaders. So my question to you, Rocio, is how does culture impact leadership?
Wow, it impacts it 100%. And I would say because we know exactly where we're coming from, and we only see the world through the lens that we grew up in, right? And especially during our formative years, from the age of 0 to 7, that's where our beliefs are framed. And then they're solidified throughout our lives. And so it depends, right? It depends on the culture. Is the culture very authoritarian? It depends on where we're coming from, really, to understand. I think the key is for me to understand where individuals understand their culture, right? Because if we don't understand where they're coming from, we don't know how to better impact them and support them on their own journey. It's like having 100 million children, right? Depending on how big your company is.
Correct.
We must get to know them individually, because whatever it is that however they see the world, that's what they're going to bring into the workplace, right? And when we have agreements, and I also believe that we can, although we have our own individual culture, that we can have agreements here. We can agree to have these conversations. For instance, in my culture, people don't look at you in the eyes, and especially not children, because it's seen that it's a disrespect. And so when we see it in different cultures, it's like, we must get to understand who it is that we're leading, how we're leading, and really get curious, really get consciously curious about their life.
Interesting. So, Rocio, let's now talk about coaching. And you did mention you are a coach, but given your own amazing journey, from the time you were a 12-year-old to not just writing a book, but also creating this amazing game, the Mindshift game, which we spoke about. My question is, how has your own background supported your own coaching philosophy, your style, and your values?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Ash, I had coached for almost 17 years before I even turned coaching onto myself. And what really got me is when I made that decision in 2011, I said, okay, what am I going to do differently now as I continue to move forward? I realized that nobody had ever coached me. And I realized that nobody could really coach me because I had worked with a lot of individuals. As a matter of fact, they were very highly qualified individuals in different capacities. And I said, wow, I knew myself. I knew exactly what it was that I needed. And that's what informed everything that I do today. That my world is internal. However I experience my world, whatever it is that I need is very individual. Nobody can tell me what to do. They can guide me to discover what's important for me to do and lead me in that particular direction. So I would say that my own individual experience has led me to know in my own belief that we have all the answers inside of us. It is about asking the right questions for that particular individual. Because if I tell them go jump, let go. If somebody calls me and says, I'm holding on, let go. Well, guess what? They're in the middle of the ocean and I can't see them, right? Only they know what situations they're in and what they can do as a result of that.
Well said. My next question is that, all of us have people who have influenced our lives. And very often these influences come into our coaching engagements. So my question to you is, how have you been shaped by people in your life? And how are they influencing you as a coach today?
Well, I'd say that I've been influenced by so many different people, like between Dr. Joe Dispenza, really looking at the power of meditation, the power of how people lead and so forth. And I knew I was naturally competent at meditation. I just didn't know exactly how it worked.
Mm,
And in seeing that going over and over again, as a matter of fact, I have a meditation, a daily inspiration, which incorporates speed coaching along with a meditation 5 days a week, where people are just popping up like popcorn. I'd say that's a lot of people like Dr. Stephen R. Covey, people like even Bernie, who really inspired me to look at different things. But at the end of the day, it created my own style. I
mm,
borrowed from this person, borrowed from that one. I borrowed even from my own past and my own
mm,
coaching and created something completely new.
mm,
And I know that everything evolves. And as I continue to grow, I continue to shift and create new
mm,
ways of
mm,
interacting with
mm.
coaching.
Very interesting. Uh, we spoke about culture when it and how that impacts leadership. Now, my question to you is, how does culture impact coaching?
Mm, that is huge. It does as well. It does exactly. So
Mm,
I think the major thing from a coaching perspective that I recognized very early on in my career, that
mm,
it's not about me, right?
mm,
To continue to ask questions, because we can be influencing individuals in a way that is not going to be leading them to their greatest success.
right.
It's all on them. So
Mm,
I'd say anything that we touch, depending on where we're from or what we've experienced, will definitely make it to our coachees.
mm,
And it's up to us to be consciously aware of, is this my own personal opinion that I'm
mm,
asking, or is this my cultural?
mm,
Anything,
mm,
whatever it is that I've experienced will make it out if I don't
mm.
become consciously aware of it.
Interesting. My next question to you is about the young, uh, the millennials and the Gen Zs, who are now coming into positions of authority in the corporate world. Now, I'm from the boomers generation, but I've often said that millennials and the Gen Z leaders are bringing in a breath of fresh air into most organizations. My question to you, Rocio, is what are some of the areas, in your opinion, that these young leaders need to be coached in?
And I agree with you, most definitely. They're bringing in such new things into the environment, right? What's more fair, it's more more out there with us. And I'd say the things that I'd love for people to be more aware of is to understand people, where are people coming from, right? When Dr. Stephen R. Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, really to understand before we were understood, right? To seek, where is people coming from? Having more patience, more authenticity
Mm,
into that. I think those are things that would really help individuals communicate, because I think we're all attempting to get to the same goal.
mm,
We just have a different path of going about it. And when we can understand that, hey, you want the same things that I want, right? You want to be successful. You want to make sure your numbers are there. You want to make sure that you recognize. You want to make sure that your team is succeeding. But really, let's get to understand individuals, because I think a lot of the times we disregard them way too fast because we don't know how to communicate with them in a way that we
mm.
meet them in the same place that they need to be met at.
Interesting. And my last question to you, Rocio, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing journey and all your learnings as a chief leadership officer, as an author, as someone who's made this game, what would you say are three lessons or three learnings you would want our viewers and listeners to take away?
Mm. Life is a journey. First
Absolutely.
and foremost, it is not a destination. It is
Yeah.
about when we learn that everything that we experience,
Mm.
Ash, is there for a reason and it's there to serve us.
Yeah.
Then that changes the way that we look at things, to say, this isn't happening to me, this is
Mm.
happening through me, and it's happening for me. So that would be number one. Number two is that all the answers are inside of us.
Mm.
everything is inside of us here now. And when we recognize that that is our truth,
Mm,
that we're the only ones that can make these decisions. We're always looking for somebody else to make decisions for us. What do you think? Should I go this path? Should I go that path? And
mm,
then we get upset at the end of the day because sometimes it doesn't work out. And I
mm.
would say probably vast majority of the time, it doesn't work out the way that
Mm.
we intended it from others to make those decisions for us.
Correct. Correct.
And then the final thing would say to develop yourself,
Mm,
constantly develop yourself, right? Like I've never been this age ever before, and I'll never be this age ever again. And I mean this age at the age of 47 here, this day, I'm never going to be that. So experience every moment
mm.
and continue to transcend because there's always new things to learn. I love learning from different cultures. People do things differently. I just stand back and observe and say, wow, now I have another 10, 15 ways of doing the same thing that I used to do. And
Oh,
what a remarkable asset to have.
how wonderful. And on that note, Rocio, and your three amazing lessons, life is a journey, not a destination. All answers are inside us, and keep developing yourself constantly or be a lifelong learner. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. Uh, Thank you for speaking to me about Unstoppable, the 7 steps to becoming a more intentional leader. Thank you for speaking to me about the Mindshift game and showing us all the different cards that you showed us. And I'm sure my viewers and listeners will be able to relate each card with what you were speaking at that time. Thank you also for speaking to me about leadership and coaching. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you so much, Ash. It is such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.